Well, that sure was some eclipse, wasn't it? Joanne mentioned it, and I hope you were able to enjoy it, since we won't have another one in Indiana until 2153, 129 years from now. 35 of us gathered there on the kitchen porch. Herb and Chris grilled hot dogs, thank you, Chris, and we ate moon pies and played cornhole, and then watched the darkening skies, and after that, the gradual lightening, a dawn at midday. Now, if we had been ancient people, it would have terrified us. We would have fled to the nearest cave. But now that we are enlightened, we know eclipses happen because God is angry and wants to smite us upside the head. And this happened just as I thought it would. The rapture came, and everyone I know is still here. If ever there were a nonsensical, selfish theology, it would be the notion that one day Jesus will descend on the clouds and rescue his true followers, that is us, leaving everyone else behind to endure a hell on earth. I have a shirt-tail relative who actually believed the world would end this past Monday and had prepared himself by laying up ample supplies of gasoline and beer. The leaders in my town, in anticipation of apocalyptic traffic jams, set up traffic barriers and cones all around town, thereby causing an apocalyptic traffic jam. Once again, proving true the adage that in life we often get what we look for. Last week, we began a new series called What in the World Were We Thinking? Because we know that in addition to acknowledging Quakerism's finer points, it also behooves us to acknowledge our shadow side, those less admirable decisions and moments, believing our spiritual institution is healthier by honest scrutiny and critical reflection. Quakers really believed in this end times stuff when we first started. We were founded in 1649 on the heels of the English Civil War, a tumultuous and frightening period in English history. And we know turbulent times often give birth to apocalyptic movements when the wider social anxiety permeates and influences the religious culture. I remember it by saying this to myself: crazy times beget crazy beliefs. Crazy times beget crazy beliefs. In the Bible, we find three separate, I'll call them collections of what scholars call apocalyptic or eschatological literature. It's the book of Daniel, the 13th chapter of the Gospel of Mark, and the book of Revelation. If you ever can't sleep and your TV is on the fritz, read the book of Revelation. It will fascinate you. Just don't take it literally or it will warp you beyond belief. But each of those collections were written during times of social chaos and persecution. Because social chaos gives birth to apocalyptic thinking, it's no surprise that we're witnessing an increase in this theology, especially among people who believe they are uniquely oppressed, which today includes those Americans who are meeting resistance to their efforts to turn America into a theocracy, with them at the helm. Our refusal to go along with their plans Our unwillingness to place our nation in their hands strikes them as outrageous and immoral, hence their anger and their renewed determination to turn our free democracy into an oppressive theocracy. It is this simple, that those who embrace apocalyptic theology truly and sincerely believe that God has anointed them to rule over us, and believe sincerely that they should have dominion over us. There's a growing movement in America driven largely by Pentecostal and evangelical Christians called the Seven Mountain Movement, or Mandate, I'm sorry, the Seven Mountain Mandate. It identifies 7 categories of society that they are endeavoring to control: family life, religion, education, media, arts and entertainment, business, and government. It is known as dominion theology. And at its heart is the belief that God has anointed and appointed them to rule every aspect of American life and culture. Lauren Boebert and Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, support the Seven Mountain Mandate. To be fair, we Quakers once shared this worldview. Our earliest beliefs were rooted in a conviction that Jesus' return was imminent. Next Tuesday, it was coming, and that the responsibility for government would be assigned to those Christians whose lives were blameless and sinless. And so we saw among early friends a deep commitment to spiritual and moral purity. That's when Christ would come again, when the Quakers started living these blameless and pure lives. The founding of Pennsylvania was called a holy experiment by early friends who were convinced that their ability to live in obedience to God would hasten the return of Jesus. Gradually, 2 things became apparent. The first thing, we had overestimated our ability to live blameless lives. And the second thing that became apparent to us after a while is that Jesus wasn't going to descend on the clouds to set the world right, no matter how desperately we longed for that to happen. Eventually, we reinterpreted the return of Jesus, saying it would not be a global cataclysmic event as we had thought, but rather a personal, inward event as Jesus entered each human heart, one person at a time. We no longer believed Jesus would be heralded by trumpets, but looked for his return instead inwardly in the still small voice heard in our gathered silence. When I was working at Public Service Indiana, right out of high school, I met a Jehovah's Witness who believed with all his heart that Jesus' second coming was imminent. He spoke with such confidence about it that I began to think he was right. And I so admired him. I admired the strength of his faith and conviction and found myself wishing, boy, I wish I could have his faith and confidence. I would love to have that. I was dating Joanne at the time, and we were planning our wedding when the man advised me not to marry Joanne, that I should not be thinking of marriage because Jesus would be returning within the year, and I needed to focus on my relationship with Jehovah. rather than my relationship with Joanne. This presented a problem because I was far more interested in Joanne than I was in Jehovah. It turns out I made the right decision. And that was 40 years ago, and here we are. And I talked with that man last year. I called him on the phone to see how he was doing, and he is still waiting, still waiting. Here's what I've thought since then. The people who scan the heavens and pore over the Bible looking for the return of Jesus aren't any more faithful, any more Christian, any more privy to the will of God than the rest of us. They are simply more frightened, overwhelmed by a world they cannot control, but desperately want to. And I understand that. I understand that. There isn't one of us in this room who hasn't felt overwhelmed by a world we can't control. But our hope should not rest in a miraculous intervention, in Jesus descending on the clouds to make things right. Our hope should rest in one another, in the warmth of mutual love and affection, in our conviction that those who come after us will build upon our efforts just as we must build upon the efforts of those who preceded us. Which is why I believe our salvation will not be sudden and spectacular, but gradual and gentle, as each human heart learns to love that which is beautiful and pure and gracious.